Hey, what's up guys and gals? My name is Rick9G. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to be talking about Three's Company. Now, if you do like the show, don't forget to look at my Three's Company playlist, as well as my other classic TV shows that I cover on this channel. And if you do like what I see, don't forget to hit the subscribe and like button to this video. Why? Because it's absolutely free and it helps support smaller channels like myself. So let's get right to it. I want to really focus on the Ropers and Mr. Furley. Now, of course, they were part of the supporting cast of this show, and the show began itself with the Ropers. Now, the show starred John Ritter, Joyce DeWitt, and of course Suzanne Summers, and later on they added characters here and there. But the Ropers, that is Stanley and Helen Roper, were the actual landlords of the apartment complex in which the three roommates lived in, that is Janet, Jack, and Chrissy. In regards to that, that's how the show started. That's who we knew. We're going to talk a little bit about them and what they made them unique as a comedic duo. But then we move on to Mr. Furley. That is, he was played by the amazing Don Knotts. Now, what was great about him, he came in as a single individual replacement for the Ropers. Now, let's get into why the Ropers left in the first place. In fact, the Three's Company was actually doing really well as a show. The ratings are really good. And so much so that the Ropers thought, well, that is the characters who played the Roper, Norman Fell and Audra Lindley, they played, of course, a husband and a wife. And I would almost say they were one character. Yes, there were two separate characters, but in fact, they were a comedic team that they were the Ropers. They were half of a full orange. So you had the husband who, of course, kind of the snarky, commenty man who would make all these snarky comments. He, of course, wouldn't want to be romantic with his wife, and of course his wife Helen would always want to be romantic with her husband. So there was that kind of dynamic push and pull between them. There were some jokes of intimacy here and there, and that's how their characters worked. The audience basically loved them. However, it was interesting to note that because they got so popular, the producers thought, hey, maybe these two can actually have their own show, their own spin-off, The Ropers. They actually did. It was not successful, and in fact, it was canceled very shortly thereafter. It didn't last too long. And so, in fact, they were out of a job, unfortunately. But to replace them, we had the amazing Don Knotts. Now, Don Knotts, of course, many know from the Andy Griffith Show, and he was a completely different character. They didn't get two characters to replace the Ropers. They only got one. One of the benefits is they only have to pay one individual, deal with one individual transferring versus two. And also they can cut the pay to one person, so financially it worked as well. And Don Knotts did do pretty well in terms of money. He was a well-known actor at the time, but his character was very different. He was now the landlord, or acting as a manager, landlord type individual, but he was very different. He was a single bachelor versus a married individual like the Ropers, and he was, as I mentioned, different. He was always trying to be the ladies' man, but in reality, he always struck out. His comedy was more physical. He didn't have much to bounce off of. We had Norman Fell and Audra who would bounce off of each other, their comedic words, their comedic timing, the chemistry they had with each other was great. They were a comedic team, but Don Knotts did not have that in that character. So they made him that lifelong bachelor, the man who thought he was the ladies' man, of course, and he really wasn't. But what was really comedic about him was his facial features, his facial expressions. He could express himself very fully with his eyes and his mouth. He made that puckered lip that he always would make, the bugged out eyes, and it was just a Don Knotts look. He would do that and many people would love it. He was very physical too for his age. Now, he looks a lot older than what he was on the show. Whenever I watched the show, I thought he was in his late 60s, maybe even 70s, but in fact, he was only 55 years old when he started on the show. That's not too old. And in fact, the ratings were doing very well with him on the show. Many people actually liked him, they enjoyed him. It was a different flavor that was brought to the show, and in fact, he had a lot of scenes with the guys, the kids as he often called them. That is, of course, Janet, Jack, and the gang. However, the three of them, because they changed every once in a while, but the idea was he was allowed to do a lot more physical comedy with John Ritter as opposed to Norman Fell, who wasn't really a physical comedian in that sense. He didn't really contort his body much or have his comedy in his entire body. It was more maybe through an expression, a look at the camera. It was more of a snarky comment and then his look at the camera and laugh type thing, versus Don Knotts was very different. He would change his face, similar to John Ritter. Now, I want to know that you guys and gals are big fans. Who was your favorite? Giving, of course, a little bit of slack to Don Knotts, that he had to at least steer the entire ship himself. He was a one individual coming in for two characters, so that has to be kept in mind. I would say see him as one, see him as the Ropers, and then Mr. Furley as two separate entities. Who was your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear, and then I don't know, maybe in the future I'll tell you who my favorite was, whether it was the Ropers or Furley. We'll see you next time, guys and gals, and don't forget, be hopeful. Thank you to everyone who supports me and my channel, especially through Patreon, where you could be listed on here. My awesome diamond tier patrons Gary N, Sydney R, David D, and Ricky. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you back real soon. Links, playlists to my other 1,300 videos could be found in the description.